In a small South Carolina town, Mr. Leonard Rains is a beloved middle school science teacher known for mentoring troubled boys, running the robotics club, and winning Teacher of the Year. But everything changes when a quiet visitor at the school's open house stares too long at a faded tattoo on Mr. Rains' forearm and makes a phone call that reignites a 30-year-old federal manhunt. Turns out, Leonard Rains isn't his real name, and the life he built is based on a sealed identity, one tied to a deadly bank robbery and the unsolved disappearance of a federal witness in Detroit. As the investigation reopens, parents are divided. Some defend him, others want him gone. But one determined student, Jalen, a 13-year-old boy Rains once saved from expulsion, starts digging into the truth. What he uncovers isn't just about Mr. Rains' past. It's about his own family's history, too. Before we expose the secrets buried in this case, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because in this world of lies, betrayal, and missing files, one click might be your only way to the truth. Now, let's begin. The rain hit the Carolina pavement like it had something to prove. You could hear it drumming the gymnasium roof in waves, steady but mean, as families filed into the open house at Worthing Middle School. Bright posters lined the brick walls. Science is magic we can explain. Reading rockets. Blast off with a book. All soaked in optimism and Sharpie ink. The scent of cafeteria pizza and old floor wax floated through the air. Mr. Rains stood near the science fair display table in room 203, rolling up his sleeves as he adjusted the homemade solar generator model that one of his students, Jalen Whitmore, had proudly submitted. He always wore long sleeves, even in summer. Said it was an old habit. Tonight, though, the humidity had finally gotten to him. And that was the first mistake. Because across the room, leaning against the doorframe, was a man who hadn't taken his eyes off Rains since the moment he walked in. Not a parent, not a teacher, not local. That was obvious. His coat was damp, but his posture was dry, calculated. Government issue. He didn't take a single brochure, didn't shake a hand, didn't smile. He just stared at the faded, jagged ink on Mr. Rains' forearm. A tattoo warped with time, a coiled snake wrapped around a set of scales. A kind you don't get in college. The kind they used to mark you in a Detroit prison gang called the Balance. A group tied to 2 armored car hits and 1 vanished federal informant. Mr. Rains, for his part, didn't notice. Not yet. He was too busy guiding a group of 6th graders through a vinegar and baking soda volcano. All right, y'all, he grinned. Let's see if Mount Worthing erupts tonight. Stand back. Jalen, last time we flooded the janitor's mop bucket. Laughter rippled through the kids, and the eruption came. Foam hissed over the paper match slope. A girl named TIA squealed with delight, but the man at the door didn't laugh. He turned, stepped out quietly, and spoke into a phone beneath the awning of the gymnasium entrance. "Yeah," he said, his voice muffled by the storm. "It's him." "No doubt. Snake and scales left forearm. You were right. Leonard Rains is not dead. He's teaching science in Carolina." He ended the call, zipped his jacket, and disappeared into the night. Inside, the applause was still echoing from the volcano show. The next morning, Jalen Whitmore stared at the flyer Mr. Rains handed him. Robotics Club tryouts, Saturday 10 MI. "Bet," Jalen said. "I'm going to win this year." "I don't doubt that for a second," Rains replied, resting a hand on Jalen's shoulder. "Just don't let Terrell sabotage your code again." Jalen snorted. "Man, that boy stayed cheating." Mr. Rains laughed, and then winced a quick, subtle grimace. His hand went to his side, a twitch of pain. Jalen caught it. "You good, Mr. R?" "Old football injury," Rains lied smoothly. "Muscles reminding me I ain't 20 anymore." But he wasn't ever on any football team. Not in South Carolina. Not in any yearbook. And that night, When the man made the call, it triggered something worse than pain. Elsewhere, Washington, D.C., a low-lit room inside a basement office of the Bureau of Criminal Enforcement. A file was unsealed. Subject: Michael Wright, a.k.a. Leonard Rains, D.O.B., 1971, last seen, 1994. Status: presumed dead, unconfirmed. Charges: armed robbery, accessory to homicide, obstruction of federal investigation flight across state lines under alias. The agent in charge tapped the file twice and muttered, 31 years. Call in special retrieval. Quietly. We don't rattle towns like Worthing unless we have to. Back in town, Jalen's house. The Whitmore household was small but clean. Plastic-covered couches. A shelf full of Black inventors through history books. Jalen's mom, Monique, was already in scrubs, prepping for her night shift at the county hospital. Don't stay up late on that iPad, she warned, handing him a peanut butter sandwich. And finish that report for Mr. Rains. He's the one who made us write about failure. Who wants to talk about that? She looked at him. You got a good man for a teacher. One who sees more in you than just grades. Listen when he talks about struggle, Jay. Jalen shrugged. I guess. He didn't know it yet, but he was about to find out exactly what Mr. Rains had meant about failure, and survival, and second chances. Because in 72 hours, his favorite teacher was going to be arrested in front of the entire school. And Jalen, just 13, knows always in a circuit board, would be the only one who believed the man was innocent of the worst part. It was early. The kind of early where only truckers, nurses, and kids with too much on their minds were awake. Jalen Whitmore sat at the kitchen table in silence, eyes locked on the glow of his laptop screen. The cursor blinked against an empty page, science report, lessons from failure, and he hadn't typed a single word. All he could think about was how Mr. Rains looked yesterday, the way his hand flinched toward his ribs, the half-sleeve rolled up too far, and something else now, something he couldn't shake, that man from open house. He'd stood by the door for almost 15 minutes, never speaking, never smiling, just watching, not like a parent, not like someone curious, like someone hunting. Jalen closed the laptop and glanced at the clock. 6:14 a.m. His mom was still at work. He thought about calling her. Then he didn't. Instead, he went to his backpack, pulled out his phone, and started searching. Not for the first time. He typed, Leonard Rains plus Worthing plus science teacher. Only got local PTA stuff. Mr. Rains' tattoo snake scales. Just pulled up military insignias and a bunch of unrelated snakebite articles. He tried Snake and Scales Prison Tattoo Detroit. And there it was. Grainy images, federal forums. A Reddit thread titled Balance of Blood, Detroit's Forgotten Crew. The logo. Almost a match. Jalen leaned in. It said the gang was disbanded in the late 90s after a botched armored car robbery. Some members disappeared. Others turned informant. One name was blacked out in all the reports. Anonymous. Unconfirmed. Dead or missing. He scrolled down and stopped. One commenter had posted a mugshot. The face was younger, eyes sharper, with less gray in the goatee. But the structure? The stare? It was him, Mr. Rains, but the name below it read, Michael Wright. Charged, armed robbery, Federal Transport 1994. Status, fugitive, presumed deceased. Jalen's stomach dropped. At SCHOOL 1032, Amai. Mr. Rains was pacing in front of the whiteboard, sketching the basics of magnetism with a pair of worn-out horseshoe magnets. Opposites attract. Like Jalen and sleep, he teased, to scattered laughter. Now, why does a magnet lose power if you drop it? Hands flew up. Rains nodded to Terrell, who always had too much confidence. 'Cause it's old? Terrell shrugged. Incorrect, but poetic. Mr. Raines smiled. Jalen didn't raise his hand. He was too busy staring, watching the edges of Mr. Raines' jaw, the way he moved. Every gesture suddenly felt ... rehearsed, like someone playing a part. At the end of class, while kids grabbed their bags and joked about getting out early for the pep rally, Jalen stayed behind. Mr. R? Yeah, kid? You ever live in Detroit? There was a pause. Just a flicker, barely there. Mr. Raines blinked, turned slowly from the desk, and said calmly, That's a pretty random question. Jalen fidgeted. I was just ... curious. My uncle used to live there. Said they had these gangs with tattoos. One had a snake and some scales. The silence stretched. Then Mr. Raines smiled again, gentler this time. Detroit's a long way from Worthing, Jalen. What you see online ain't always the truth. Right, Jalen nodded, pretending to buy it. But deep down, he knew something was about to snap. Worthing Middle School, main office, 1:11 p.m. The two men wore dark suits. Not quite FBI black, but close. The kind of plain that looks expensive. They entered without flashing badges. Just handed over an envelope and asked to speak with Mr. Raines privately. The secretary, a nervous woman named Linda, called the classroom. The gym teacher, Coach Bell, was asked to sit in. A routine background check review, they claimed. Mr. Raines didn't flinch when they walked in. Didn't ask for credentials. Didn't ask who sent them. He simply set down the robotics club sign-up sheet, glanced toward Jalen, who was still lingering by the doorway, and gave the slightest nod, almost like a goodbye. 2:27 p.m., the rumor spreads. By third period, the whispers had bloomed into wildfire. Mr. Raines got arrested. No, they just asked him questions. Nah, I heard he's in witness protection. My cousin said he used to be in a gang. He killed someone, for real. Jalen sat in the library, knees bouncing, eyes fixed on the entrance. He didn't know what was worse, believing it might be true, or being the only one who hoped it wasn't. 3:41 p.m., the knock. Monique Whitmore answered the door in her house slippers, still in her scrubs, exhausted from back-to-back trauma shifts. The man at the door held a folder and wore a gray tie. Ms. Whitmore? Yeah? I'm Agent Clay, Federal Bureau. May I speak with you and your son? Monique's spine stiffened. Why? This concerns his school. His science teacher, Mr. Raines. Behind her, Jalen stood frozen in the hallway. He hadn't even changed out of his school shoes. You're here about him? He asked, voice small. The agent turned to him. Actually, Jalen, we think you might know something we don't. Agent Clay didn't sit at the kitchen table. He stood hands folded, eyes steady like a man trained to make others uncomfortable. Jalen sat across from him, still wearing his school ID around his neck. Monique Whitmore stood with her arms crossed near the fridge, jaw set tight like she was ready to throw someone out of her house. You said this was about a teacher, she said sharply. So talk plain. Don't try and circle my boy. Clay nodded. Understood. Leonard Raines isn't who he says he is. We believe he's actually Michael Lamont, Wright, fugitive connected to a federal armored car robbery in 1994. That case included the murder of a protected witness. Monique let out a cold laugh. And y'all just now figuring this out after letting him teach 7th grade science for 6 years? Clay gave her a look that wasn't quite an apology. He used a clean alias. Nothing in the system flagged him. We received an anonymous tip. Monique's eyes narrowed. He touch a kid? Hurt somebody? No, ma'am. Nothing like that. Then what you want from my child? Agent Clay turned back to Jalen. We know you're close with him. He's written personal recommendations for you, yes? Runs the robotics club you're in? Jalen nodded slowly. Has he ever mentioned Detroit or used a different name around you? Any stories that didn't add up? Jalen hesitated. Thought about the mugshot, the tattoo, the flinch in his teacher's face when he'd asked. No, he said finally. Nothing like that. Clay gave a practiced pause. You sure? He's not dangerous, Jalen said, louder this time. Whatever he did back then, it ain't who he is now. Clay steadied him. Sometimes people change. Sometimes they just get better at hiding. Jalen stared at him, heart pounding. Or maybe the government just forgot what mercy looks like. The next D.A.Y. Worthing Middle School. The district office wasted no time. By Thursday morning, Leonard Rains' nameplate was gone from room 203. His classroom was locked, his belongings boxed. Official word was pending investigation. Unofficial word? Everybody had a theory. He was definitely a spy. My uncle said he used to run with a bank crew. Bet he faked his death like Tupac. Jalen walked the hall with his hood up, earbuds in, but no music playing. He didn't want distractions. He wanted answers. At lunch, Terrell slid into the seat across from him, grinning like he knew something. You heard what they said on the news? Dude shot a federal informant and walked away with $500,000. Jalen's jaw clenched. They don't know that. They just said suspect, not killer. Terrell raised an eyebrow. Whatever, bro. Guess it's your hero now. Jalen stood up, tray untouched. Where are you going? Terrell called. To do what the news won't, Jalen muttered. The archives, downtown Worthing Library. Mrs. Gladstone, the archivist, wore glasses so thick they looked bulletproof. She barely glanced up when Jalen entered. Back rooms closed unless you got district permission, she said, flipping a page in her crossword book. I'm doing a personal research project. She eyed him. For school? For someone who might not be guilty. She stared at him a moment longer, then slid a clipboard toward him. Write your name, and don't damage nothing. He found a stack of old newspapers stored on microfilm reels. Worthing didn't have much coverage on Detroit, but a few stories made the syndicated columns. It was a 1994 article in the Detroit Free Press that froze him. Witness missing after testifying in federal robbery case. Authorities suspect foul play. Main suspect, Michael Wright. Associated gang, the balance. Trial outcome, delayed indefinitely. Jalen leaned in, scribbled the details into a worn spiral notebook. Something didn't sit right. The article said Wright vanished before the trial could finish, that the witness vanished a day before he did, not after. Then he saw another piece, buried in the back pages. Unconfirmed tip suggests internal gang retaliation may be behind missing witness. He frowned. That meant someone else could have killed the witness before Wright even fled. But if the case went cold after that, why did the feds lock so hard on Wright? He grabbed his phone and snapped pictures of everything. Jalen's room, midnight. Stacks of notes. Printouts. Threads of thought tied together with red pen and highlighter. Jalen was no detective, but he was good with patterns. And what he was seeing now, it looked less like guilt and more like a cover-up someone gave up trying to prove. A single handwritten note sat at the top of his desk now. If they won't clear his name, maybe I can. Elsewhere, federal holding site, location unknown. Leonard Rains sat in a beige room with no windows. His hands were chained, but his eyes burned with the kind of clarity you don't get from freedom, only from decades of watching over your shoulder. A younger agent across from him flipped through a file, pausing now and then to glance at him. So, 31 years. You had a nice run. Rains said nothing. You were just a trigger man, right? That's what they always say. Still nothing. You know we reopened the case. And this time, we have people willing to talk. Leonard leaned forward, quiet, controlled. People like to talk when it's safe. But that don't mean they remember right. The agent tilted his head. You think we got it wrong? I think, Leonard said slowly, you want it to be simple. And I ain't ever been simple. It rained again the morning of the hearing. Not the loud, southern thunder kind, just a quiet, drizzling mist that clung to everything like memory. Jalen wore his best church shirt and a too-big navy jacket his mom had ironed 3 times over. He stood outside the Worthing County Courthouse, his backpack stuffed not with books, but with proof. His mother had tried to talk him out of coming, said courtrooms weren't meant for 8th graders. Sighed sometimes justice didn't move for kids with spiral notebooks and screenshots. But Jalen wasn't listening. Not this time. Inside, the hallway buzzed with suits and murmurs. A U.S. Marshal, posted at the end of the corridor, nodded stiffly as they passed. Room 204. Detention hearing. State v. Michael Wright. When they opened the doors, the courtroom was already half full. Parents, teachers, one local reporter with a coffee stain on his shirt. But most faces looked confused, betrayed, a few curious, 1 or 2 angry. And then Jalen saw him. Mr. Raines, no tie, wrists cuffed, but still standing straight, chin high. His eyes met Jalen's for just a second, and something passed between them. Not gratitude, not sorrow. Something braver, trust. The case unfolds. Federal Prosecutor Myers laid it out in clean, emotionless strokes. In 1994, Michael Wright was affiliated with the Balance, a Detroit gang connected to 2 armored car robberies. A federal witness in the case disappeared before testifying. Wright vanished the next day. For decades, his file sat cold until a tip surfaced this year, linking him to Worthing under a new identity. That's when Jalen raised his hand. The courtroom paused, confused. The judge, a tired, no-nonsense black woman named Judge Dolores Holt, leaned forward. You're not on the witness list, son. I know, ma'am, but I got something they didn't show. The prosecutor started to object, but Judge Holt silenced him with a look. Come forward, Mr. Whitmore. Jalen Whitmore. You're the student? Yes, ma'am. He handed her a manila folder. Inside, old Detroit newspaper clippings, online forum screenshots, archived case summaries, highlighted timelines, inconsistencies, and 1 key article. Witness last seen in contact with another gang member, not Michael Wright. Holt read silently. Then again. The prosecutor shifted. This is speculative, he began. No, Jalen interrupted. It's overlooked. Your case says Mr. Wright disappeared after the witness did, but this article says the witness was last seen arguing with someone else from the gang. Then he vanished. Jalen turned toward the bench. Maybe Mr. Raines did run. Maybe he was scared. But that don't make him the killer. It makes him human. Silence held the room like a breath no one wanted to release. Judge Holt finally spoke. I want this article authenticated. I want the FBI report timeline cross-checked. And until then, this man is released under supervised custody. Gasps, a few claps. Monique hugged her son, tears in her eyes. Leonard Michael Raines didn't smile. He just closed his eyes and exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for 3 decades. 1 week later, Worthing. Mr. Raines didn't return to room 203. He wouldn't teach again. The district made that clear. But the charges? Quietly dropped. No press conference. No headline. Just a red stamp and a sealed box marked insufficient evidence for federal prosecution. He never asked for an apology. And Jalen? He didn't stop asking questions. He started a blog called Unforgotten Files, where he broke down old cases like puzzles, focusing on people buried beneath their pasts. His first post was titled, The Man Who Taught Me Science and How to Stand Up. Final scene. Under the magnolia tree. A spring breeze swept through Worthing's Central Park. Jalen sat on a bench with his robotics laptop open, tapping notes. A shadow fell across the screen. You left out the part where I made y'all build a volcano that flooded the janitor closet. Jalen looked up. Leonard Rains now, just Michael stood there in civilian clothes. No cuffs, no chains. He held out a folded note. What's this? Michael shrugged. Job offer. There's a community STEM camp upstate. Heard they're looking for young minds with guts. Jalen unfolded it. Reed smiled. I'll think about it, he said. Michael nodded. You saved more than just me. Jay, you saved what people thought about me. Jalen looked out at the fountain, then back at the man who taught him how to solder wires and stand up to giants. No, Mr. Rains, he said. You did that yourself. I just turned the light back on. This story wasn't just about one case. It was about how quickly truth can vanish when assumptions replace evidence, and how unchecked authority becomes a weapon instead of a shield. It was about fear, how it twists judgment, silences witnesses, and turns policy into harm. But more than anything, it was about dignity and the fight to hold on to it. For every family who never got the apology, for every name that was buried under suspicion instead of cleared by justice, for every child forced to grow up the moment someone else decided they looked guilty. So if this story made you feel something, don't let it end with sympathy. Let it push you to ask harder questions, to challenge what's hidden, and to care before the sirens start. You don't need a badge to speak the truth. You just need to know when silence becomes complicated. If this story spoke to you, like, share, and comment, because conversations lead to awareness. And awareness? That's where justice begins.